I call the member for Moroni.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you. I present a bill for an act to enhance the transparency and public accountability of the decision-making processes for public-private partnerships. I table the bill and the explanatory notes and a statement of compatibility with human rights, and I nominate the Housing Big Build and Manufacturing Committee to consider the bill. Madam Deputy Speaker, I present a bill for an act to promote consistency, transparency and accountability around the public-private partnership arrangements here in Queensland. And I table the bill with the explanatory notes and the statement of compatibility with human rights. I nominate the Housing Big Build to consider this bill. The Public-Private Partnerships Transparency and Accountability Bill provides a framework for establishing a culture of openness and transparency around the state's commercial deal-making with the private sector. Its primary objectives are to promote public trust in government, aid in the prevention of corruption, achieve true value for money for Queenslanders, and ensure that the public-private arrangements in Queensland are conducted in accordance with the principles of transparency, fairness, stability, proper management, integrity, accountability and long-term sustainability. Madam Deputy Speaker, public-private partnerships, or PPPs, allow private consortiums to finance, build, operate and deliver public infrastructure and services that have traditionally been the province of the government. It is a model that explicitly relies on the private sector's profit motive to provide public goods. Here in Queensland, PPPs have been used for nearly to deliver everything in Queensland, from roads, tunnels, railways, energy and water to schools, aged care, hospitals and prisons. Despite all this, there is still no specific legislative framework in Queensland to regulate these extensive arrangements between the public and private sector. This bill will therefore fill an important gap in the state's legislature. In doing so, it seeks to increase public knowledge and trust around how public monies are being spent in Queensland and what contractual commitments the government is taking on, which may bind the state and its citizens for decades to come. Overall, the bill will make a real difference by providing the people of Queensland with the tools they need to ensure the state's massive infrastructure program and government services are delivered in a transparent and cost-efficient manner as best as possible. And the bill responds in part to the various findings and recommendations made by the Queensland Audit Office over the past decade. On 14th of December 2023, the Queensland Audit Office released a report on the state's major projects, which highlighted that clear and complete reporting on capital projects is critical to building public trust and ensuring accountability. In relation to Queensland PPP arrangements, the Auditor-General recommended that the Treasury update its practices to include details in its summaries on service payments and contributions from private sector companies, and to annually publish a report of completed projects in conjunction with the capital statements showing the total amount of actual expenditure at the completion date. In Let the Sun Shine In review of the Queensland public sector culture, Professor Coldrake wrote that the government must be prepared to defend its decision to withhold information publicly, and that agencies should not be so quick to agree to confidentiality clauses which are proposed by sophisticated commercial parties to protect their own interests. As the Auditor-General put in his report on the contract management, the public has the right to know how much public money government is spending on what and with which vendors. It is important. The bill recognises this key principle of democratic government, that the public has the right to know how its money is being spent and whether everything is being done in compliance with all the proper guidelines for the allocation of those funds. On page 13 of the QAO's major project report for 2023, the Auditor-General provides a comparative overview of the disclosure requirements for the PPPs here in Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. The table shows that Queensland's disclosure requirements are much less transparent than the other two states. Under Queensland guidelines, the government is not required to provide the details of PPPs, project advisors, risk allocations, contract termination rights, contract modification procedures, the value for money analysis, service payments or any of the parties' contributions, including private financial details. The guidelines also don't specify any time frame for the tabling or publishing of the PPP project summary reports. As the Auditor-General notes, this can lead to delays, with the information becoming outdated by the time it actually becomes publicly available. The bill also introduces a requirement for the public sector entities to carry out and make publicly available its value for money assessment on proposed PPP projects. Under Clause 13, subsection 2, subsection C of the bill, the public sector entity must consider for each step in the project the priority of the step, alternative ways of achieving the step, the cost and benefit alternatives and approaches. Clause 13, Section 4 of the bill requires that the public service comparator PSC also carried out as a part of the VFM due diligence to ensure that the right model is chosen for delivering public infrastructure and services. The PSC data methodology and findings must also be made publicly available on the government website. The bill encourages the public sector to adopt a balanced approach when determining value for money. Assessments free of confirmation, bias or third-party influence. All options must be considered. The reason public service comparator is so important is because governments are able to raise capital at a significant lower cost than a private consortium. With interest rates continuing to rise, so has the cost of private finance compared to the government's borrowings, making PPPs a much more expensive option for delivering services and infrastructure for the state's needs. Governments often use VFM assessments and PSC calculations produced by private consultants who almost always find ways to justify using a PPP model instead of the public procurement. This is achieved by the adjustments based on intangible benefits such as efficiency gains, risk transfer and value-added innovations. Proponents of the PPPs always like to claim that much higher costs of PPPs, particularly on financial side, are offset by transferring colossal amounts of risk to the private sector. In reality, however, risk transfer in PPPs is very limited. Risk can never be completely transferred through PPPs because governments will always be ultimately accountable for delivering public services and infrastructure. This responsibility is not charged by expensive, highly complex PPP arrangements. If problems arise, it is the public that always has to pick up the bill at the end of the day. If PPP operators run into problems or don't achieve expected returns, they can just walk away, leaving the public sector to pick up the tab. Since public services need to be continued uninterrupted, governments have a hard time refusing additional requests by private partners or changing penalties for poor performance because the entire PPP may fail. And this means that the private partner is always in a stronger bargaining position. The cost of private finance compared to public borrowing has always been the biggest weakest point of a PPP. In 2011, Financial Times worked out that UK taxpayers were paying well over $20 billion in extra borrowing costs, the equivalent of more than 40 new hospitals, for the 700 projects that successive governments had acquired under the private finance model. PPPs also limit the government's ability to respond to major economic crisis due to their long-term inflexible contracts and high costs. When there is a need to cut public spending, for example, it is the services that are not managed by the PPP contract that actually get slashed. And this was confirmed by the IMF in 2018 Physical Affairs note, which states, while spending on traditional public investments can be scaled back if needed, spending on PPPs cannot. PPPs therefore make it harder for governments to absorb physical shocks. It is important to always remember that these PPP consortiums are accountable to their shareholders and not to the people of Queensland. They select projects based on whether they will be commercially profitable, not on whether they serve the public interest. In other words, they may distort public policy. The main way a consortium has to profit from PPPs is to cut corners, also known as creating efficiencies, especially when it comes to staffing levels and the delivery of services. In Lesso, Africa, a PPP consortium built a hospital for which the government had to pay an annual concession of $32.6 million, almost double the annual budget of the old hospital. Within a year, the PPP reduced its services, reduced the number of doctors, cut the number of beds and placed limits on the average length of stay for patients. Madam Deputy Speaker, to date, the Queensland Audit Office has played a very insignificant role in the governance and the oversight of government's PPP arrangements. At the recent estimates hearings, I asked the Acting Auditor-General whether AAOQ had ever performed a performance audit on public-private partnerships here in Queensland. And to my astonishment, the answer was no. I have since discovered that the only 3 states in Australia that ever had PPP audited by the State Auditor-Generals are New South Wales, Victoria and Western Australia. One study from 2017 stated that over a 22-year period, only 12% of all Australian Triple P projects had been audited by a State Auditor General. In Queensland, that is 0%. This means Triple P projects and services in Queensland have been subjected to no independent oversight whatsoever. That's a statistic that I think should shock all Queenslanders. It certainly did me, particularly given that the extremely patchy record many of the Triple Ps have had in recent times when it comes to cost blowouts, poor service delivery, completion delays and huge cost increases across the board when the whole thing is up and running. Deputy Speaker, the national Triple P policy has been endorsed by all Australians, state and territory governments, and applies to all Triple Ps that are released to the market, apart from this state. State governments have their own jurisdictional policies and guidelines around the use of Triple Ps. However, for most part, the state's Treasury Department appears to be the sole agenda setter, rule maker and evaluator of Triple Ps. Very little is known about the private sector entities engaged in many of our multi-billion-dollar projects in Triple Ps here in Queensland. Many are private investment trusts who have structured their assets and liabilities inside special purpose vehicles, SPVs, with no obligation to disclose beneficial ownership, financial statements or majority shareholdings. Triple P transactions have numerous commercial and confidence provisions we are told are needed to protect the trade secrets of entities within the consortium. The counter-argument to this is that publicly listed companies are able to disclose their financial dealings to their respective stock exchange while still managing to maintain profitability and security of commercially sensitive information. There is no reason, therefore, that these secretive trust companies shouldn't do the same. Moreover, as the Triple P contracts are in areas where there is effectively a monopoly, the argument of competition should only rarely apply. Madam Deputy Speaker, with the unprecedented number of capital projects in Queensland's pipeline over the next few decades, greater level of transparency and oversight have never been more urgently needed. The underlying principle of the bill is that the information should be made public unless there is a justifiable commercial in confidence reason for non-disclosure. This means that as much information in the government PPP contract as possible should be made publicly available, and where this is not done, the government must be called on to justify why it isn't. Under Clause 21, the Treasurer must publish a statement annually containing financial information about each major project undertaken as a Triple P that year. It must also ensure that the stream of future Triple P payments and government accounts are included in the annual budget, including which budget these annual costs are being paid from and what the actual cost is to government and the taxpayer will be. Far too long, unregulated global financial markets have been siphoning away funds from productive investments in the real economy. And as a result, the paper economy has grown, but the real economy has stagnated. Meanwhile, smaller Queensland contractors are being squeezed out of the access to government infrastructure contracts, while foreign-owned superannuation and private equity trusts take public monies out of the state and out of this country. Madam Deputy Speaker, democracy thrives when people can see and understand and participate in decisions that affect their lives, when decision makers are accountable for their actions and when leaders lead with integrity. Countless opinion polls show Queenslanders have lost confidence in the government and elected representatives. Transparency lies at the heart of all good governance, and the more we rely on hidden and secretive Triple Ps, the more our democracy is eroded, along with the public trust and the infrastructure and services people actually need. One's based on the public good, not shareholder profits. It's time to insist on full disclosure, full public consultation, full decision-making and full accountability from the decision-makers in our government. As the Auditor General said, there should be no secrets when it comes to public money and how it's being spent. And I am confident that this bill will deliver a robust legislative framework for the future, one that ensures the affordable and transparent delivery of critical infrastructure and services that all Queenslanders need. And I commend the bill to the House. Yeah.
Thank you. Member, can I ask that you move that the bill is now read a first time?
Can I move that the bill now be read a first time, Madam Deputy Speaker?
Thank you. The question is that the bill be now read a first time. Those of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Those against no. I think the ayes have it. I call the clerk.
Public-Private Partnership, Transparency and Accountability Bill.
In accordance with Standing Order 131, the bill is now referred to the Housing, Big Build and Manufacturing Committee.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.